I'm Spencer Kitley. I'm the Customer Success Manager here at CoveritLive. We very much appreciate you joining us for the 11th edition of CoveritLive University today. Before we get started, I want to give a brief overview of today's session on customizing the viewer experience. We expect the webinar to last between 20 and 30 minutes. And at its conclusion, we'll take questions which can be sent through the WebEx client chat window at the top of the screen. Additionally, if you have any questions during the webinar, you can click up there as well, and a member of our staff will either log that to answer at the end or answer through the client chat. Tomorrow this webinar will be posted online, and you will receive an email to let you know that it's there so you can pass it along to any colleagues or associates that were unable to join. Also wanted to remind you, you can contact us at any time through the email address support@coveritlive.com. You can like us on Facebook, or follow us on Twitter @CoveritLive. Again, apologies for the delays. Now I'd like to introduce the host of today's webinar, the General Manager of CoveritLive, Ben Schneider.
Thanks, Spencer. And thanks everybody for joining, and apologies also for the getting started a few minutes late. If any of you have ever tried to run or participate in an event in WebEx, then you probably sympathize with having some technical difficulties with either the phone or the presentation or both, and that's what we experienced a little bit of this morning. But hopefully everyone can hear us well now, can see the WebEx, and we should be good to go. Today what we wanted to do was focus on things that you can do to customize the viewer experience and different ways in which you can do that. One of the things that we've observed is a lot of users of CoveritLive, particularly when they're new, pretty much use the default settings out of the box, and while that looks good and there's a lot that you can do there, it doesn't necessarily match your site as well as it could, and you may not be aware of some of the other appearance and display options that you have to customize how CoveritLive looks, how it behaves, and how you can control some of that, as well as some of the more advanced things that you can do, whether it's using our API or working with us on a custom skin to even match your site more specifically. Also, we'll speak to a few things that are coming in the future that will even give you more flexibility in making CoveritLive an extended part of your site. Today we'll cover some of the basic things like being able to add your own branding, changing fonts, language, and other settings you have control over, as well as which of those things can be saved to a template versus which can be overridden at an event level. We'll also discuss changing the size of the viewer window and some things that you can do there, and a couple of different ways that you can do that. And then walk through some other examples of things that you can do for more extensive customization, whether it's the CoveritLive API, the global skins, which change the layout of your event, or even custom skins. So, to get started, we'll start with some of the real quick and easy things that you can do, including TitlePage Branding and other branding options that you have along the window. I'll walk you through here in just a minute how you can use the CoveritLive templates to change not only the display settings, but also just default settings for how your event behaves. So that way, whenever you create events in the future, by default, they'll automatically keep the same settings that you've had on those events in the past. And if you're a part of an enterprise account with a lot of other users, how you can make sure that you share those so that way all of your events are consistent. I'll also walk through a few of the options you have around title pages, understanding what they're useful for, when they're a good benefit and when they're not, and how that can change your display for your particular event. So let's jump into that first. Now, as I'm logged into CoveritLive and I see my live events, the first thing I want to do is take you over to the Appearance and Settings section, which is under Extras whenever you're logged into CoveritLive. When you're in the Appearance and Settings section, this is where you can customize how your templates behave. So by default, everyone will get the normal CoveritLive standard template and all of the settings that accompany that. But if you want to change those, you can do that. You can essentially create a new template name, and then start making your own settings. This is where you can do things like change the main image that appears on a title page. And just as a quick refresher and reminder, title page is the window or the veil that is on top of your event before a user can see any live updates. And this is an option you can enable or disable. It's really useful if you want to use it as an opportunity to show a brand or sponsorship, or you want to very explicitly track who has entered the event. But sometimes it's also useful to turn the title page off if you want everybody to see some of the live updates right away, so that way it entices them to look at the event. Or maybe you want to have a non-stop running stream of updating content somewhere on your site, say it's on a home page or on a long-running event, and you may not want a title page included. And those are both use cases and great examples for both. But when you are using the title page, as you see here, you can control that logo that is displayed. By default, it says CoveritLive. It has our branding, but you can include your own. And if you want to do that, then you can click in and update an image, or select an image, rather. I'm going to select one that I have set up for CIL. You will notice that there is a specific size to make it appear correctly, and that's 380 by 150 pixels. And I went ahead and created a CIL logo that'll fit into that. Similarly, there's a secondary image which appears at the bottom of the toolbar. You'll notice that in this example right here for the UK Athletics. And that's an image that you can control as well. Not all of the layouts in CoveritLive include that image, but several do. And in the one that we've kept so far with the default image, it does include it. And for that, I'm going to select this image right here, which also has a predetermined size to make it appear exactly as I want, of 175 by 16 pixels. Some other controls that I have are to change the default dimensions of the window. These are 470 pixels wide and by 550 high by default, but I can change that. Let's say that the main part of the website that I'm going to put this into is in the article area, and I actually have a little bit more room than that. I want it to be 500 pixels. And I want it to be taller in the page, so I want it to be 600 high. Then I can change those default settings. Now, I'll get more to sizing your window in a moment, but that's something that you can override at an event level. And some of these settings can be overridden at an event level, or even whenever you're embedding the widget code. Some of them cannot. And I'll go through those in a little more detail as we walk through the rest of the settings. One thing to keep in mind is it's really important to get your images accurate and as close to these sizes as possible. And also, if possible, it's really great to use a format that includes a transparent background. What that means is that it's clear. If you're not a graphic design artist, or you're not somebody who's familiar with all that terminology, the main thing is whenever you have a logo or an image or something like that, you want the back behind it to be clear so that it matches any color that it goes to on the page. If you'll notice, whenever we have the title screen, there's the veil background right here is a dark gray, and you don't want to have your logo have a white box around it or a black box that doesn't match nicely. Similarly, whenever you have a logo down at the bottom, you want that to match whatever that toolbar color is, whether that's the gray that comes by default or one of the other colors that's in one of the other skins. So if you have a transparent logo and you use a format such as a PNG or a GIF, GIF, those can support transparent logos. If you need to know of a quick graphics program to help adjust those sizes, a lot of times the newer version of Paint that's included on a Windows machine actually has the basics you need to resize something. There's also a nice Windows utility called Paint.net that I frequently use that's free, and it gives you a lot of the same functionality as Photoshop, but it's completely free and open source. Of course, there's also more robust graphics programs by Adobe, including Photoshop and others that give you a great deal of flexibility if you need that as well. So getting back to some of the other settings, now that we've set and picked some logos, you can also note here that if you want something that is animated or runs dynamically, you can include a Flash file as a part of that logo on that main title page as well. Now here are some options around skinning, and I'm going to come back to skinning in a little bit wherever we talk about what skin we want to pick. Right now, we're going to use the default skin that comes out of the box whenever you first start using CoveritLive, and I'll revisit some of these other skin options later. I've already adjusted the dimensions and the size that I want to work by default. And I can also decide what font best matches my site. Now, we limit this to fonts that are truly web-safe, that don't require additional downloads by users, or that are not embedded, things that mostly will align with most sites, or at least complement the existing font for a site well. If you're serving up different languages, you can also choose what language by default you want the controls and the information that's not just the content of your event to be. And you can also change the background color for that veil. And if you ever have questions about any of these after the CILU, or just whenever you come back to do it later and don't remember what we talked about, there's help information included with all the little help notations all throughout the settings. You can also decide whether you prefer a 12-hour or 24-hour format. Most people in the United States prefer the 12-hour, but a lot of times in Europe and in other countries, the 24-hour format is preferred, and even by some organizations in the U.S., 24 is becoming more common. In addition to just those display settings and sort of how the event is going to appear, you have control over things like whether or not the event has system sounds, the sounds that come in whenever new content is introduced, and it makes a little ticking sound, a pop sound. You can also indicate whether or not you want the event to automatically scroll as new content comes in. And then here's where you can turn on and off your title page. By default, we'll leave it on for now, so that way we can see some of the settings that we've created. You also have some controls over whether or not you want to enable reader comments, whether you want your newest CoveritLive entries to be on the top or the bottom of the event in the stream of the flow, and whether or not you want to display writers' avatars. Also, which reader login options you want to enable if you want to restrict or require login. You can also, at a template level, create custom ads. And this is something that's available to all of our custom annual subscription account customers. And if you're using self-serve or a month-to-month plan, this isn't included in as a part of your plan, but if you're interested in it, we can set it up for you. But it's a great tool for you to include advertising whenever somebody first clicks in to watch the live updates from your event. You can have a pre-roll video, display ad, or even a static advertisement that just plays for a number of seconds before the user gets all of the live updates and then goes away. You also have control of whether or not they get the close or skip button, etc. You can set that up at an event level or at a template level. And then finally, you have an option to know whether or not you want to set this as your personal default template, which means anytime you create an event, we're going to use this template, this new one that you've created by default, and use these settings for your event. And you also have the opportunity to share that with other people in the enterprise account. If this is something that you want all of your events across the enterprise account to do, if you want these settings to be consistent so your events will always look the same and behave the same way, then this is absolutely something that we recommend. Sharing it with everyone else in the enterprise account means that they can see it and use it as a template when they're setting up an event. And making it the default means that by default it will be selected for anybody. And that automatically creates an event. Now they can override it, but if they don't do any settings other than just create an event and use the defaults, then they'll get these particular settings. Now once I've done all of this, I can save my template settings and continue to make some additional changes. I also have the opportunity to preview them. And I can preview it in 2 different modes. I can see what it's like whenever the event is upcoming and it hasn't started yet. So I can see my CoveritLive logo there. That I've uploaded. You can see with a transparent background how it looks better in blend, although I picked a dark veil color so they don't, it makes it a little harder to read, so I might want to change that. Also at the bottom you can see how well my branding fit in with the toolbar. Now let's go back because I don't love how that looks. And let's make a little bit different of a veil background for my title page. And so I can see what that looks like and preview that and decide if I like that better or not. Similarly, I can preview other modes, such as when the event is actually active and what it'll look like whenever it's running live. So you get some examples here. I can see my branding down at the bottom and all of the options based on whatever skin and whatever settings I've chosen. Additionally, I can see what the event will look like in standby. And replay modes. So this is a great tool where you can kind of preview, make sure that you like your settings and adjust them and resave them if there's anything that you want to change. Now we'll come back to these settings in a minute. I want to jump into some of the things that you can do with our global skins and also show you how these apply whenever you're creating an event, as well as which of those settings are event-specific versus which ones cannot be changed once they're set in the template and the event is started. So we've walked through a great deal about CIL templates. We've talked about how we can use them to change the fonts and display language, time format. You've seen those settings. And the viewer window settings that you have control over, including comments, newest entries, etc., as well as sharing those templates into your enterprise account. One other thing to note is you notice there was a setting for whether or not you want to display writer avatars. And we thought it'd be a good time to mention as well that whenever you're using avatars and you're using writer avatars inside the event, the ideal size for those up front is to be 96 pixels by 96 pixels. If it's not a square, which you'll notice that size is a square, if it's not a square, then you're going to get a distorted view, whether it's a logo or it's a person's face, it's going to look out of whack because it's going to be distorted and not the appropriate ratio. If it's too small, it's going to get blown up to fit that space and feel very pixelated and grainy. And if it's too big, it may also look pixelated and grainy because it will have to resize it automatically to force it down, and it may look too constrained or small. So if you can optimize and go ahead and set that avatar to 96 pixels by 96 pixels and get it cleaned up before you add it, before your writers add it, panelists or producers, and you pass that information on to them, they're going to look much better, and it'll feed their ego as they will look much nicer as they appear all throughout the event. So now before we get into some of the other pieces that you can do, I'm going to jump back over into the settings and show where you apply the templates whenever you're creating an event, and then how that impacts how you can change the size of the viewer window. So you already know that you can save that in your template and do that, but where does this actually impact? Where do you see and how do you use your template now that you've created it? Now that I've created my CILU, my default template, I can see other templates that other users have shared with me or that I've created already, as well as the CoveritLive standard template and what those settings are. But how do I use that? Well, first, whenever I go to create a new live event, you'll notice that in addition to the other settings that are already included in default, including the name of the event, I have here the option to pick from my template. And my personal default, or even the enterprise account level default, will already be selected for me here. So those settings that I've created in that template will all be applied, and I don't have to change anything. So we'll go ahead and create our event and get going. So now that I've done the initial step of creating the event, I have additional event option level settings that I can change or alter. You'll notice a lot of these overlap with the settings in the template, but they're already defaulted to whatever my template settings were. So disabling the title page or enabling it, it's using my templates of having, or my template setting of having the title page enabled, but per event I can override that by clicking to disable it right here. I can also disable reader comments, as well as other options in terms of which order the content appears in live as well. And there's also some of these settings that I can adjust in the Event Studio. But in general, I'm happy with my default. I've made any selections to override anything that I want to. You'll also notice that my viewer window size right here includes the default that I've set up for the template. But again, at a per event level, I can change those. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to generate new code to put on my page. I want to make this particular one a little bit bigger. We'll save my changes, get a nice warning to make sure that I don't forget. And then I'm going to launch my event. Now, at any point in time, you can always go back and grab embed code for an event even once it's live. And if you want to embed the event in multiple places, and maybe it's being syndicated to multiple sites, or maybe you're putting a teaser on the home page that shows the event content, but you have another page that's fully dedicated, or you're using our channel pages to feature the content, but you want a widget on certain pages or on the sidebar of your site, you may want to make it a different size. For my sidebar version, I may not have a full 500 pixels. Over there I've only got about 300 or 350 because that's where we put our ads. What I'm going to do now is show you just really quickly how whenever you're working with the embed code itself, you can actually change that height and width yourself without going into CoveritLive and logging in, without having to change those height and width settings in the template or on the event creation page. You can still create that and change that height and width anytime you want by just editing it directly in the embed code. Now, if you're not familiar with code, it may look like a lot of foreign language that you don't want to mess with, and it's a little bit intimidating. But it really doesn't have to be. There's two different places that you need to change the height and width each. And all you have to do is look very quickly for height equals and width equals and make your change there. So I'm going to make this one a good bit smaller. And I'm going to make the width a good bit smaller to fit inside my little right rail for my ads. I change it in that one place, and then you look just a little bit further and you can change it again. And you want to make sure those match so you don't get any weird scrolling issues. One of these tells the widget how big it should be, and the other one tells the page how much space to reserve for the widget. And if those don't line up, then you get weird things like images or content being cut off and the scroll bar is not looking correct and things like that. So you can make those changes, override it, and then go paste that into your page or into your template or whatever it may be that's on your site where you're putting your CoveritLive event, and now you've changed the size. So you can have any particular event run in multiple sizes depending upon what pages that it's on. That's also something for developers to note and for your technical team to keep in mind, where if they want to dynamically adjust the size of that window based on different experiences such as tablet or mobile or something like that, they can do that. They can detect what the user is, what sort of a layout that they have, and then make that height and width different. Now currently variable height and width is not supported, so for example a percentage saying 100% of the page or 50% of the page, although there's some changes we'll have some coming down the road that will allow you to do some things like that and work it more discreetly into a responsive type design. But in the meantime, you can make these changes right now. Now one other thing I wanted to note is, in addition to being able to change some of those settings once you create the event, you have your template level settings which say in general how you want everything to work, and there's some things about using that template that you cannot change once the template has been selected or once the event is live. Then there's settings that you can change on your event whenever you're creating it and launching it, and some of those can be different and override what you originally set for the template, which we showed. But you also have some of those settings that you can change even once the event is live. Now you can't change your template currently, and you can't change some of those other layout options that we walked through, but if you click on settings, you can see a number of things that you can change at any point during your event. So, for example, reader comments. And this is great to do if, for example, you're going to run and you're going to take reader comments for a while and have an interactive chat covering your live event. But then you're going to take some time off and you're going to keep including Twitter content or other content, but you're not going to be reviewing and reading comments from users, and you want them to understand that and don't submit them while you're running the event. So you can turn that off. Then whenever you're ready to start manning the event again and come back and start taking those comments, just simply turn them right back on. You can also control reader attachments and the ability to email comments and turn those things on and off at any point during the event as well. You also can flip your setting around whether or not newest entries are on top or bottom during the course of the event. You'll note that the channel page presentation already controls that explicitly, but any of your widgets or other embeds, you can change that. System sounds, as well as some other new features like whether or not you want YouTube videos that you drop into your event to autoplay or not, are all settings that you can control right here and change at any time live during the event. Also, as a reminder, in the Event Studio, if you click on Tools, you can re-grab your embed code at any time. Again, using that trick I showed you, if you wanted to send that to somebody really quickly who wants to syndicate it or add it to their site, you can do that, and they can also change that height and width to match their layout better. So the last area I'll jump into around all of these settings and things that you can control using templates is global skins. Global skins are the layout and style that you see the CoveritLive event displayed in by default, and that your users see through the viewer window. I'm going to go back over to Appearance and Settings, and I'm going to load back up our CILU template that we've created today. And you'll notice I've already got my main image saved that I added earlier, and my secondary image, etc. And all my settings are here, so I can change those and resave those to this template. Now, I mentioned that I was going to skip over skins and come back to those. I'm using the classic CoveritLive skin right out of the box. But you'll notice here that there's a number of other skins I can choose from, including a clean skin, a simple skin, a text skin. And here we have an example of a white label plus, which is a custom skin that has been created for this account, which I'll go into in a little bit later. But for right now, we'll stick with these first three, the clean, the simple, and the text. These are all alternative layouts to your event, and they control a number of things, including where date and time is presented, how entries are divided up, whether or not they use an alternating color or a divider line, and things like that, as well as whether or not the toolbar and the branding on the bottom of the event displays. And it all depends upon how you want your event to look, what sort of experience you want, and what other pages you're including it in. And you can choose any of these templates at any of these skins rather at any time to completely change the layout of your templates moving forward. There's a great great way to preview this out on the support site. And while that's loading, I'll jump back over here and walk you through each one of these skins. So as you can see here, here's an example of the clean skin. You'll notice a nice little subtle divider that's by the avatar. The time is included in the lower right, but there's not a great deal of detail around date and time. It's also very neutral coloring, very light. Here's the simple skin, which is also very neutral and light colored, but it alternates the entries. It has more detail around the date and the time, and some other subtle differences around that in the layout. And then you have what's lastly called the text skin demo. You'll notice this is a little darker. It has a little bit richer feel. The toolbar looks inverse relative to what the normal CoveritLive toolbar looks like, a little more coloring. But again, it's just another example of how you can change the layout and have a very different look and feel to your event. And here's an example of a custom skin. So a skin that we have created on the CoveritLive side for a customer to very specific specifications, and then included that in their account as something they can use. These take more time to design and oftentimes some back and forth, and so there is an additional charge for custom skins, but we can set them up and then they're available ongoing moving forward in your account to be used at any time. Now, if you want to learn more about the custom skins or the global skins, then you can jump over into our support section, which anybody can access online anytime, and read about custom skins, see some examples, and also learn more about how to request one, which you can contact us through support at CoveritLive to do. And you can also learn about global skins. You can see some tips, some examples and demos of each one live with some updated content actually included. So once again, we have our clean skin, our text skin, and our simple skin, as well as additional detail around how to control these settings. Remember, at any time, any of these settings that we walk through today, you'll be able to review on the CILU video on the website, but there's also all of this detailed information in the support center that's searchable and that you can find and read through and do at any time in case you need a refresher or you want to point to it for somebody else. So now as I jump back over and actually show the changing of these global skins from within my template, you'll notice some other changes that happen whenever you pick these as well. For example, when I pick the clean skin, it tells me that this selected skin doesn't permit a secondary image. Based on the layout of that skin, there isn't a toolbar part at the bottom that allows branding, and so that image is no longer needed, no longer in use. You don't have to add that. For the simple skin, they're both used. For the text skin, again, that secondary image is not included and not available to be displayed. So you can see, based on the skin settings, some of the things that may change or that you may alter about your layout. We'll go with the simple skin for now, so that way I can continue to use both of my images. And keep in mind that even that main image will not be used if I turn the title page off, except for certain cases like reminders, etc. And I can also see that. So I can preview my updates, see what things are going to look like now that I've changed my skin. Now keep in mind that template changes won't affect your events that are already currently using that template, but it will affect the ones that you want to use it for moving forward. So there's my upcoming. There's my active event. Now I can see that it's laid out very differently, with viewer comments or reader comments coming in one color and those that are panelists and producers coming in another. I can see the standby mode, as well as replay mode, just like I did before with all of the changes that I've made based on my skin. So again, global skins are a great way to make your event look unique, make it match your site better, and to further customize the overall experience. And if you want to take it a step further to include richer branding to completely change the layout, much like you see here with the example from Sonos, where you can see it looks very different than most events do out of the box, then you can talk with us and we can work with you to create a custom experience around that. Here's another great example of custom skins of Anthropology, as well as with Entertainment Weekly, who use it for their live blogging dashboard for covering the Oscars, the Academy Awards, the Golden Globes, the Grammys, and other award shows. So another example of a way that you can customize your layout is use a channel page. And this can be used in conjunction with anything else that we've shown, and you can change your widgets and your embeds, which I've mentioned a few different examples where you may want to use those widgets and embeds as teasers on a home page or as part of a right rail that's on every page of your site, that have a full page dedicated to your event that has unlimited scrolling. It's not bound to the iframe or the widget bar, and it has more control over the look and feel by matching your site directly and a seamless feel in terms of how it works within your site. We've shown these a few times in the recent CoveritLive University examples, but ChannelPages are a great way to do this. I'll show you an example real quick. So if we hit up on live.foxsportsflorida, where they had a channel page set up running their events for the finals for the Heat versus the Spurs, you can see there's a nice landing page that shows any of your current live events as well as upcoming events or even an archive of completed events. And then you'll see the CoveritLive event that will display here. Takes up the full page. They're using one of our live scores that had automatic updating stats and scores for the game. And had a lot of automatic Twitter content coming since the game is over, and it can allow reader comments while they were actually doing the coverage or providing their own commentary. And you can see that it's continual throughout the page. Users can load more, very similar to the layout that you would find for Twitter or Facebook or something like that, where you have an infinite scroll. And these are pages that we are hosted for you, and they also provide the additional capability of giving you SEO available content. So any of this content can be accessed by search engines. If you have a nice home for your events, it's persistent and easy for users to find, simple URLs, and content that can be delivered up to be visible to those search engines and get indexed, bringing you more traffic. So there's a lot of great advantages in addition to being able to have a much more customized layout and experience that flows and fits with your site much better. Keep in mind that channel pages are inclusive of custom subscription customers who are on annual plans. If you're using the self-serve month-to-month subscriptions, channel pages are not included, but they can be added for an additional price, just like the custom ads that we mentioned earlier. And if you're interested in that, please reach out to us through support@CoveritLive.com or contact Spencer, and we can get you up and going and talk through that. The last area is just a kind of note around how the API that CoveritLive has provides you an opportunity to completely customize the look and feel of your event. Now, this obviously is something more for developers who are used to working with APIs like this for Twitter and Facebook and others, but it's a great example of how you can make a completely unique experience using the CoveritLive API. You can submit content, pull all the content out, display it in whatever way you want, and create a completely new experience. You can see this with Yahoo's example for their control center, which they've used for breaking news updates, the presidential elections, the State of the Union, the Boston Marathon explosion, and that coverage as the followed on throughout the week in tracking down the suspects, as well as numerous other events. And it's a great interface and a way for you to optimize that, whether it's because you want to use it for a tablet or mobile dashboard or just because you want a very unique and customized experience. Here are some other examples of that for the State of the Union, where it was also paired with video. And then also Le Monde in France, who has customized by including any kind of breaking live news, an API-centric live event on the home page that's in a smaller window that provides some updates, and you can click to expand that or view the entire event and click over to see that in a fully dedicated page. And this is a great way to show users those updates and entice them and pull them in, so that way they follow along longer and know what's going on. So as alluded to, there's also some additional options coming where many of the features that you currently have in a channel page, including the ability to have ongoing infinite scroll and not be bound to the scroll bars in the box, and rearranging your comment box in the toolbar and things like that that are included in the viewer window, will also be available in our widgets and our embeds, not just in channel pages coming in the near future, as well as some other exciting new things where you'll have more control over the display and layout of your templates, over the look and feel, and the ways that you can control that between different widgets for the same event, as well as between events and overall across all of the different live streams or live event coverage that you may be doing, as well as some new formats as well. So stay tuned. Those will be things that we'll be speaking to you more on and giving you some updates as we get closer to unveiling those. But keep in mind that the flexibility is only going to grow, and a lot of the great things that you can see currently in channel pages and in some of our other custom skins will also be things that will be available to you to control directly out of the CoveritLive console and My Account and Appearance and Settings area as well. So thanks everyone for taking the time and bearing with us through a few technical challenges getting going. I hope that you found some beneficial information or a refresher on some stuff that maybe you knew but forgot, or found some new tips and tricks that you want to use coming soon. If there's any questions, we'll take a look at those now, and Spencer can toss those to me, or we can follow up individually after the session. And while he's checking those, I'll take a quick opportunity to remind you that we'll have our next event on Thursday, July 25th, and stay tuned for what the topics will be.
And as a reminder, to submit your questions, you can go to the top of the screen and click on Chat. and send us your questions. We'll be happy to answer as many questions as there are. We'll give it a few minutes. We do have one question here to start with from Chris, who wanted to know if there were any guidelines, general rules of thumb, what's best as far as like the size of the iframe. Is it a particular size? Is it bigger or smaller?
Well, in general, that's a great question. And some of that depends upon where you're putting the iframe. So, in general rule, the bigger the better, because there's lots of rich content, particularly if you're including photos from Instagram or Twitter or embedding any video. We've recently made changes that we covered in previous CIL University sessions where we talked about how now the images will automatically fit to the viewer window size and they'll scale. And that way users can see those images easier and they see them bigger. They can still click on them to see the full thing in a new screen. But generally speaking, you want to give as much availability, make it as easy for the user to consume the content as possible, and bigger is better. But that also depends upon the constraints of where you're putting that particular CoveritLive experience. If it's inside of an article layout or a template in a page, then obviously making the width and consistent with what your standard article width would be, so that way you can still have your advertising and branding and layout accompany that page will be important. Normally that's something in the 400 to 600 range, depending upon how navigation and other elements of the page are structured. In terms of height, that varies because many people have different size resolutions on their screens, and the last thing you want is to make it difficult on them by having to scroll between two different things. But most of the time we see windows that are too short. They can make them bigger and fill roughly the entire height of somebody's screen minus some of the browser pieces, because what most users are going to do when they see that live coverage is scroll down to that part of the page, and they want that full live coverage to fill the height of their page, so that way they can just sit there and follow along. They don't have to scroll back and forth. So knowing that most users are going to do that, you should give as much height to that window as possible, and generally give it something that's going to be wider in the realm of 500 pixels, 600, 700 pixels, where people can see that full event in their window, not so high that they can't see the full event, but that they can scroll to it and make it fit inside their screen, inside their browser, and follow along very easily. Of course, if you're using ChannelPages, you don't have to worry about that because the scrolling is going to be infinite. The updates are automatically going to come at the top. And then you'll have some of those options coming in the widget soon as well. But for now, those are kind of the key recommendations for sort of the primary experience. And then if you're going to use the widget as a discovery tool or as a teaser on other pages, then it really just depends upon what the available size is you have on those pages. So if it's in a right rail, then normally that's going to be something like 300 to 400 pixels, and you probably have 300 to 500 tall to work with. If it's, if it's inside of a special graphic on a home page, then that can vary. And we've seen some examples of that where Built out of Germany and others have done that exact thing, embedded a smaller CoveritLive window inside of a graphic for their Academy Award coverage, and that entices people to click in and view the larger window on another page.
Reminder, if you want to submit any questions, go to the chat window or chat tab at the top of the screen, send those over, we'll be happy to answer them. I have another question here from Herb. This question is regarding, what are the instances when you would want to utilize the newest on top versus the newest on bottom within the chat window? That's obviously referring to where the content's coming in.
Yeah, that's another great question. Generally speaking, and it should be noted as I hit on this whenever I was showing some of those settings and examples whenever I changed them inside the Event Studio, but just to make it clear, for something like a channel page, we automatically put those newest entries on top because we feel that's the best experience and provides the best user interaction, so that way they don't have to scroll to the bottom every single time and look, and as things added continue to scroll. We're automatically putting them at the top. And if they want to go backwards to read, they can go back and look at older updates, and we will queue new updates up at the top so that way the page doesn't move on them. When they're ready to get back to the most recent updates, then they can click to start again. In general, we feel like that's really, really helpful whenever you've got something that's just sort of ongoing coverage nonstop, or if you're not going to allow reader comments and it's mostly going to be one-way conversation that you're putting those updates into, whether it's from Twitter or directly or a combination of those and other social sources. So that newest entry on top is something that automatically happens for channel pages, but if it's an event where you're not going to allow comments and you're not going to, you're just going to essentially do one-way updates your stream, that's something that users are most most likely to expect. They're expecting those entries to constantly appear up at the top and continue updating and push everything else down. What we do see, though, is whenever you're doing events where you're engaging a lot with the users, whether you're running a Q&A or an interview session or a chat session, or maybe you're live blogging a sports match or a game or something like that, but you are interacting a lot with users and taking their comments and responding, that actually having the newest on bottom is normally much more intuitive, because users are expecting to scroll down to comments, and that's where that comment box usually is. That's where they're expecting to interact, and that's what they've been conditioned to do by seeing comments in other places. And they want to keep doing that. And they want to write more, they want to add some more, and so they want to see those updates come right above so that way they can respond to that and interact. So obviously that can depend upon the layout of your page, what type of event, how long the coverage is going to be. There's a number of things that influence that, but sort of in a general rule of thumb, if you're going to do sort of one-way streaming updates, newest at the top works the best for most cases. If you're doing a real interactive session and you have a lot of participation by your users, they're jumping down to that comment box, and they don't want to have to scroll back and forth to see where the updates are while they're commenting. And so having the newest on bottom is usually beneficial.
All right. If anyone else has any further questions, please don't be afraid to ask them. We don't currently have any further questions. I'll give a couple more minutes. If anyone would like to submit a question, please do so. Also, Ben mentioned earlier, I wanted to remind you our next CoveritLive University session, the 12th session of CoveritLive University, is Thursday, July 25th at 11 a.m. Eastern. The topic hasn't yet been determined, but that will be available to you at CoveritLive.com. You'll also receive a reminder email a couple weeks out from that with the topic and information for RSVP.
And also, if you have any ideas or thoughts or suggestions that you want to provide for CoveritLive University sessions, then please do. A lot of times we get ideas from things that happen either in support or that customers and users have raised through questions through there and through the support center, and that gives us great ideas around things which likely other people have questions on and can be covered in a CILU session. So if you have any suggestions, feel free to send them our way.
Any suggestions, any comments, any questions you have from today that you did not ask, you can ask those to us at support@CoveritLive.com. We appreciate you joining us. We look forward to seeing you again next month. And Ben?
One more thing is to also check out the CoveritLive blog. You're going to see a lot of cool updates and features there around things that aren't necessarily settings or features that are specific to CoveritLive, but they're capabilities that you can do and that you may not be aware of that you have access to that are going to come from more of our staff, including Jill, who runs our product development. And so keep checking the CoveritLive blog. There's lots of great customer examples there as well that Spencer and others have featured, as well as tips and tricks and also upcoming events that are really great that you'll also find through the newsletter that's coming out monthly as well. So watch for those things and make sure you check those, because those are also great resources, and you'll see some cool updates coming particularly in the next couple of days.
All right, that's all we have for this edition of CoveritLive University. For Ben Schneider and Spencer Kipley, we'll see you again on Thursday, July 25th. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.